The satellite feed cut to static at 3:47 hours, 37 minutes after the U-60 Black Hawk disappeared from radar screens across 3 countries. In the operations center at Bagram Airfield, Colonel Patricia Voss stared at the blank monitor, her weathered fingers drumming against cold metal. Somewhere in the Hindu Kush Mountains, a helicopter carrying 8 souls had simply vanished into the night like smoke dissolving into darkness. What made this particular loss extraordinary wasn't the terrain. Afghanistan had swallowed countless aircraft in its jagged embrace. It wasn't even the mission parameters, though extracting a high-value target from Taliban territory under a new moon qualified as routine insanity. What made this disappearance different was the man in the pilot's seat, Alexander "Ghost" Petrov, tech mogul worth $43 billion, who had somehow convinced the Pentagon to let him fly combat missions. The military brass called it a publicity stunt. Defense contractors whispered about tax write-offs and political maneuvering. Even the seasoned aviators at Forward Operating Base Chapman had rolled their eyes when the orders came down. Some rich boy playing soldier, they said, buying his way into their war like it was an expensive vacation package. They'd given him the call sign Cash behind his back, though officially he went by Ghost, a handle he'd apparently chosen himself with typical billionaire ego. But Colonel Voss remembered something the others had forgotten or never learned. Before Alexander Petrov built his empire of quantum processors and orbital satellites, before his face graced magazine covers and his name topped Forbes lists, he had been Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Petrov of the Russian Air Force. He'd flown Mi-24 Hinds over Chechnya when most of these American pilots were still learning to drive stick shift. The man hadn't bought his wings. He'd earned them in blood and fire 2 decades before he made his first billion. Now Ghost was missing, along with Chief Warrant Officer Maria Santos, Staff Sergeant Dylan Brooks, Sergeant First Class James Knox, Corporal Lisa Chen, Private First Class Ahmed Hassan, and 2 classified passengers whose names appeared on no official roster. 8 heartbeats that had simply stopped registering on any frequency or thermal signature. The silence stretched across the operations center like a held breath. Outside, the Afghan wind howled through razor wire, carrying the scent of dust and diesel fuel and something else, something that tasted like endings. Thunder rolls across the Shomali plain as the first search aircraft lift off into pre-dawn darkness. The HH-60G Pave Hawks rise like metallic locusts, their rotors churning the thin mountain air into invisible violence. Captain Rachel Storm Morrison grips the cyclic of her aircraft, eyes scanning instrument panels that glow green in the cockpit's eternal night. Behind her, Master Sergeant Torres monitors radio frequencies that crackle with static and desperation. Bagram Control, this is Rescue 17, proceeding to grid November Delta 4719. Request weather update for target area. Storm's voice cuts through the radio chatter with professional calm, though her knuckles whiten against the flight controls. She's flown over 300 combat hours in this theater, pulled 47 souls from situations that should have been graves. But something about this mission feels different, charged with the kind of electricity that precedes lightning strikes. The response comes through layers of atmospheric interference. Storm, be advised target area experiencing severe weather patterns, winds gusting to 60 knots, visibility near zero. Recommend holding pattern until conditions improve. Negative Control, we have 8 souls down there. Storm banks the Pave Hawk toward the mountains, her crew chief already running pre-deployment checks on the hoist system. In the cargo bay, 2 pararescue specialists, PJs in military parlance, study topographical maps by red-filtered flashlight. Their equipment bags contain everything needed to keep humans alive in the most unforgiving environment on Earth. Trauma kits, oxygen bottles, thermal blankets, and enough morphine to stop an elephant's pain. Senior Airman Marcus Doc Williams looks up from his medical kit, catching Storm's eyes in the rearview mirror. "Ma'am, if they survive the crash, hypothermia is going to be our biggest enemy. Temperatures dropping below freezing up there." His words carry the weight of experience. Doc has seen what the mountains do to human bodies when the sun goes down. Then we better find them fast. Storm pushes the aircraft harder, the twin General Electric engines responding with increased urgency. Below, the landscape transforms from desert scrub to rocky foothills to the knife-edge ridges that have broken armies since Alexander the Great. The Hindu Kush rises ahead like the spine of some prehistoric beast, each peak crowned with snow that glows ghostly white under starlight. The radio crackles again, this time with a different voice, older, more gravelly. All search elements, this is Colonel Voss. Be advised the missing aircraft was carrying sensitive cargo. Recovery is priority one, but use extreme caution. Intelligence suggests increased enemy activity in the target zone. Storm feels her jaw tighten. Sensitive cargo usually meant weapons, classified technology, or personnel whose capture would create international incidents. It also meant that someone, somewhere, was willing to kill to prevent recovery. The mission just became exponentially more dangerous. Copy Control. Rescue 17 inbound to search area. Will advise upon contact. The storm hits them at 9,000 feet altitude, slamming into the Pave Hawk like a physical blow. Rain strikes the windscreen in sheets that turn the world into a liquid blur, while wind shears grab the aircraft and shake it like a predator worrying prey. Storm fights the controls, her years of experience the only thing keeping them airborne as updrafts and downdrafts battle for possession of her helicopter. Jesus Christ! Sergeant Torres grabs his harness as the aircraft drops 50 feet in a heartbeat, then rockets upward again as if yanked by invisible cables. His radio equipment rattles against mounting brackets, threatening to break loose and become projectiles in the cramped cockpit. Language, Torres, Storm mutters through gritted teeth, though her own pulse hammers against her throat. The artificial horizon spins wildly, gravity seeming to shift directions every few seconds. Outside the windscreen, lightning illuminates the mountains in stark black and white photographs that burn themselves into retinas and disappear. Then, in one of those miraculous moments that separate veteran pilots from statistics, the storm parts like a curtain. Storm sees it first, a dark scar across a snow-covered ridge, too straight and purposeful to be natural. Contact, she calls out, banking the Pave Hawk toward the crash site. I've got wreckage at bearing 270, approximately 1 click north of the planned route. The Black Hawk lies broken across the mountainside like a discarded toy, its main rotor separated from the fuselage and embedded in a stand of stunted pines. The tail boom has snapped completely, leaving the aircraft in 2 distinct sections connected only by severed cables, and the kind of devastation that usually kills everyone aboard. No smoke rises from the wreckage, but the metal still gleams with a particular sheen that suggests recent impact. Rescue 17 to all stations, Storm reports, circling the crash site while Doc and his partner prepare for fast-rope deployment. Confirmed Black Hawk down at grid November Delta 4722. Aircraft appears to be split in 2 sections. No visible signs of fire. Preparing to deploy PJs for survivor search. Below, the wreckage remains ominously still. No signal flares pierce the darkness. No emergency strobes pulse their desperate messages into the night. But Storm has learned to read crashes the way archaeologists read ancient ruins, and something about this particular disaster scene troubles her professional eye. The debris field is wrong somehow, too contained, too organized. Doc, you seeing what I'm seeing down there? The para-rescueman peers through night vision goggles, then nods slowly. Looks like a controlled crash, ma'am, like somebody actually flew it into the mountain instead of just hitting. Doc Williams drops through 40 feet of mountain air, the fast rope burning through his gloved hands as he descends toward wreckage that shouldn't contain survivors. The Black Hawk's fuselage rests at an impossible angle against granite that has stood unchanged since the Pleistocene epoch, its aluminum skin crumpled like paper around what should be a tomb for 8 human beings. His boots hit snow-covered rock, and immediately Doc knows something fundamental is wrong with this crash site. The impact patterns tell a story that violates every rule of helicopter disasters he studied in 15 years of combat rescue operations. The cockpit section shows evidence of controlled flight right up until impact. No wild tumbling, no loss of control spin that should characterize an aircraft falling from the sky. Storm, I'm on the ground. Something's not right here. Doc keys his radio while approaching the pilot compartment, medical kit ready, though his tactical training screams warnings into the base of his skull. This bird didn't fall, it was flown into this position. The cockpit windows have blown outward from impact, but the seats remain intact. Doc peers inside with his flashlight, expecting to find bodies held in place by 5-point harnesses and gravity. Instead, he finds empty seats still warm to the touch, with fresh blood on the armrests but no occupants. The emergency radio beacon blinks steadily from the instrument panel, exactly as it should after a crash. But the absence of human remains creates a vacuum in Doc's understanding that refuses to resolve itself into logical patterns. No souls in the cockpit, Storm. Seats are empty but show signs of recent occupation. Blood spatter suggests survivors, but I've got no bodies. He moves to the passenger compartment, expecting to find the missing crew and passengers. The troop seats hang at odd angles, their restraint systems deployed but vacant. Personal equipment lies scattered across the deck, flight helmets, survival vests, weapons that should never be abandoned willingly by professional soldiers. But again, no people. 8 human beings have simply vanished from a helicopter that couldn't have been abandoned in flight. Doc's flashlight beam catches something else. Boot prints in the snow leading away from the wreckage, fresh enough that the falling snow hasn't filled them completely. 8 distinct sets of tracks moving uphill toward the ridge line, as if the occupants had simply walked away from a crash that should have killed them all instantly. Storm, I've got tracks. 8 sets, heading northeast toward the high ground. Looks like they moved under their own power maybe 20 minutes ago. Above, the Pave Hawk maintains a hover pattern, while Storm processes information that challenges everything she knows about helicopter crashes and human survival limits. The tracks lead upward through snow that crunches beneath Doc's boots with the sound of breaking glass. Each footprint tells part of a story he can't quite believe. 8 people walking away from catastrophic impact, moving with purpose across terrain that has killed experienced mountaineers. The prints show no signs of injury-induced stumbling, no drag marks suggesting assistance for wounded personnel. Doc follows the trail for 300 meters before his flashlight catches something that makes him freeze in place. A thermal emergency blanket hangs from a pine branch exactly at eye level, silver surface reflecting his light back like a mirror. Beneath it, scratched into the bark with a knife point, are symbols that make his blood temperature drop several degrees, tactical markings used by Russian Spetsnaz forces, indicating direction of movement and group strength. Storm, we've got a problem down here. Doc's voice carries new urgency as he studies the tree markings. These tracks aren't leading to a rescue site, they're leading to an ambush position. Somebody knew we were coming. The realization hits him like physical impact. The crash was staged. 8 people had walked away from their helicopter and moved to positions where they could observe anyone attempting rescue operations. The missing aircraft hadn't fallen victim to weather or mechanical failure. It had been deliberately placed on this mountainside as bait. Get out of there, Doc. Now. Storm's command cuts through radio static as she recognizes the tactical implications. A staged crash meant hostile forces in the area, probably watching their every movement through night vision scopes or thermal imaging equipment. But before Doc can acknowledge her order, the mountain explodes into violence. Muzzle flashes bloom like deadly flowers across the ridgeline. Automatic weapons fire echoing off granite walls in staccato rhythms that speak of professional military training. Bullets spark off rocks around Doc's position, forcing him to dive behind the Black Hawk's engine compartment, while his radio erupts with Storm's increasingly frantic transmissions. Taking fire, taking fire. All call signs be advised we have hostile contact at the crash site. Storm's voice fights against the chatter of machine gun fire as she pulls the Pave Hawk into evasive maneuvers. Doc, report your status. The para-rescueman presses himself against twisted metal, feeling the vibrations of bullet impacts through the airframe. Above, he can hear Storm's aircraft taking hits, the distinctive whine of rounds passing through rotor blades mixing with the deeper bass notes of larger caliber weapons targeting the fuselage. Then, cutting through the chaos like a blade through silk, comes a voice on the emergency frequency that changes everything. Storm, this is Ghost. We're in position on the North Ridge. Recommend you break contact and proceed to alternate landing zone Delta 7. We have the situation under control. The shooting stops as suddenly as it began, silence returning to the mountain like snow covering old wounds. Storm's Pave Hawk limps away into the darkness, trailing hydraulic fluid and carrying more questions than answers. On the ground, Doc Williams crouches behind wreckage that suddenly seems less like a crash site and more like a carefully constructed stage set, wondering exactly what kind of performance he has just witnessed. The alternate landing zone sits in a narrow valley 3 kilometers from the staged crash site, a patch of relatively flat ground surrounded by peaks that rise like cathedral spires into the star-filled darkness. Storm sets the damaged Pave Hawk down with the delicate precision of a surgeon, her aircraft's hydraulic systems bleeding pressure through bullet holes that will need immediate attention. Rescue 17 is on the ground at Delta 7, she reports, already running shutdown procedures while Doc and his partner secure the landing site. Aircraft has taken multiple hits but remains flyable, requesting immediate backup and explanation of what the hell just happened up there. The response comes not from Bagram control, but from a figure emerging from the tree line, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the fluid economy of motion that marks professional soldiers. In the green glow of night vision, Storm recognizes the face from briefing photos. Alexander Petrov, the billionaire pilot who was supposed to be either dead or captured on the ridge above. Good evening, Captain Morrison. His accent carries traces of Moscow winters and American universities, education layered over military bearing like expensive clothes over old scars. I apologize for the deception, but circumstances required unconventional tactics. Storm keeps her hand near her sidearm, though she doesn't draw. The man approaching her aircraft is supposed to be a missing casualty, not someone conducting complex military operations in hostile territory. Sir, you're showing as killed in action on our roster. How exactly are you walking around up here? Ghost, because that's who he clearly is, not some civilian playing at soldier, stops just outside the rotor arc, hands visible but relaxed. Behind him, 7 other figures maintain defensive positions in the darkness, their weapons trained outward toward potential threats rather than inward toward Storm's crew. The crash was necessary camouflage, Ghost explains, his voice carrying the kind of calm authority that comes from leading men in combat. We needed hostile forces to believe we were eliminated while we moved to intercept a high-value target. Your rescue attempt, while professionally executed, threatened to compromise 3 weeks of preparation. Storm processes this information while watching her crew chief examine bullet holes in their aircraft's skin. The damage is superficial but telling. Whoever had been shooting at them possessed the skill to disable without destroying, to threaten without killing. Professional soldiers under strict rules of engagement. What kind of target requires staging your own death? She asks. Ghost glances toward the northern ridges where intelligence reports have placed Taliban commanders and foreign advisors for months. The kind that's worth $43 billion in ransom money, Captain. The kind that thinks a missing American billionaire represents the greatest intelligence coup since the Cold War. The implication hits Storm like cold water. This wasn't a rescue mission gone wrong, but the final phase of an operation that had been running for weeks. Ghost and his team hadn't crashed accidentally. They'd crashed on purpose, using their apparent deaths as cover while they moved into position to catch someone who thought they were hunting a helpless victim. Sir, with respect, this kind of operation requires authorization from people whose names don't appear on any organizational chart, Ghost finishes. Captain, sometimes the most effective way to catch a predator is to appear to be prey. In the pre-dawn darkness, Ghost leads Storm's crew along goat paths that wind through terrain older than human memory. The billionaire moves with the silence of someone who learned fieldcraft in places where noise meant death, his expensive boots finding secure footing on loose shale that should betray every step. Behind him, the survivors of his staged crash maintain tactical spacing while escorting the rescue team toward whatever revelation waits in the mountains above. 3 weeks ago, Ghost explains as they climb, his voice barely audible above the wind, NSA intercepted communications indicating a joint Taliban-ISI operation targeting American assets in this sector. High-value prisoners, ransom demands, propaganda videos, the complete package for international embarrassment. Storm follows his lead through a gap between towering rock formations, her crew maintaining weapon readiness while processing the implications of what they're hearing. The man ahead of her isn't just a wealthy civilian with military experience. He's conducting counterintelligence operations that require coordination with agencies she's never heard officially acknowledged. The beauty of the trap, Ghost continues, was using my public profile as bait. They knew my net worth, knew my foundation's work in this region, knew I'd been flying combat missions. When my aircraft went down, they couldn't resist attempting to capture the ultimate prize, a live American billionaire with access to classified technology and unlimited financial resources. They reach an observation point where the valley spreads below them like a detailed map drawn in shadows and starlight. Ghost produces night vision equipment that appears military-grade, but carries no manufacturer markings, scanning the terrain with practiced efficiency. Target acquired, he murmurs, passing the optics to Storm. Compound at bearing 090, approximately 800 meters downslope. Through the green-tinted lenses, Storm sees a cluster of buildings that don't appear on any map, stone structures built into the mountainside, with defensive positions and communication antennas that suggest permanent occupation rather than temporary shelter. Vehicles move between buildings, their heat signatures creating moving stars in the thermal spectrum. Intel suggested this facility has been operational for 6 months, Ghost explains. Prisoner holding, weapons storage, planning center for operations across 3 provinces. Our crash provided the perfect excuse to insert an observation team. Storm lowers the night vision device, studying Ghost's face in the darkness. The man beside her has orchestrated his own apparent death, convinced military command to authorize a complex deception operation, and somehow coordinated with intelligence agencies to set up what appears to be a major counterterrorism strike. Sir, exactly who do you work for? Ghost's smile carries shadows of amusement and classified knowledge. Officially, my own foundation, providing humanitarian aid and infrastructure development. Unofficially, he pauses, checking his watch with the precision of someone timing complex operations. Let's just say that sometimes private resources can accomplish things that government agencies cannot officially sanction. Below them, the compound continues its nighttime activities, unaware that 8 ghosts watch from the darkness above, calculating angles of fire and egress routes while dawn approaches like distant thunder. The compound erupts at exactly 5:30 hours, as precision strikes light the mountain valley like camera flashes in a dark room. Storm watches from the observation point as Ghost coordinates the attack through encrypted communications equipment that shouldn't exist in civilian hands, his voice calm, and professional as he directs air support that appears on no flight manifest. Viper 1-1, you're cleared hot on the communications facility. Danger close, friendly forces at bearing 270, 600 meters from target. Ghost speaks into a headset that connects him to aircraft Storm can't see but can hear, the distinctive whine of turbines and the whisper of advanced rotorcraft moving through thin air. The first missile impact destroys the compound's communications array in a flash of white light that temporarily blinds night vision equipment. Secondary explosions follow as ammunition storage areas detonate in chain reactions that send shockwaves rolling across the mountain faces like thunder from a clear sky. Storm, we need to move to the extraction point, Ghost says, already packing his equipment with the efficiency of someone who has done this hundreds of times. Your bird can still fly, and we have approximately 15 minutes before hostile reinforcements arrive from the south. Storm follows him down the treacherous slope, her medical training cataloging the sounds of combat below, small arms fire, the crump of grenades, the screams of wounded men echoing off granite walls. But mixed with the violence, she hears something else. Voices calling in languages she doesn't recognize. Coordination that suggests this operation involves more than just American forces. Sir, who else is down there? Personnel from several interested nations, Ghost replies without breaking stride. It turns out that Compound was hosting more than just local insurgents. When international criminals decide to operate in Afghanistan, they sometimes discover that Afghanistan operates back. They reach the helicopter as the first signs of dawn begin to lighten the eastern sky. Storm runs through pre-flight checks while her crew secures the additional passengers. Ghost's team plus several figures in unmarked tactical gear who board without speaking and take seats with practiced efficiency. As the Pave Hawk lifts off, Storm catches a glimpse of the compound through her side window. What had been a hidden fortress 20 minutes earlier now resembles an archaeological excavation site. Buildings reduced to rubble, vehicles burning like funeral pyres, the systematic destruction that marks the end of long-term intelligence operations. Storm, set course for Kandahar Airfield, Ghost instructs, settling into the crew chief's seat with the ease of someone accustomed to military aircraft. There will be people waiting there who need to debrief this operation before it officially never happened. Storm banks the helicopter toward the south, carrying passengers whose faces she's been instructed to forget and evidence of operations that exist nowhere in official records. Behind them, smoke rises from the valley like incense from a completed ritual carrying secrets into the thin air where they dissolve into the kind of silence that follows successful missions. Ghost, she says over the intercom, exactly how many times have you done this? His laugh carries the weight of classified knowledge and operations that span decades. Captain, let's just say that sometimes the best way to serve your country is to let everyone think you're just a rich man playing soldier. The debriefing room at Kandahar Airfield contains no windows, no markings indicating which agency owns it, and furniture that suggests temporary occupancy rather than permanent installation. Storm sits across a metal table from 3 people whose names she wasn't given and whose faces she'll be expected to forget after this conversation ends. Captain Morrison, the woman in the center begins, her voice carrying the kind of authority that doesn't need rank insignia to establish dominance. Your actions during this operation were exemplary. However, for national security reasons, certain aspects of today's events require careful handling. Storm nods, though part of her rebel against the implications of what she's hearing. The mission she just completed involved coordination between multiple agencies, international partners, and resources that officially don't exist. Now she's being asked to pretend it never happened, to file reports that describe a routine rescue operation rather than a complex counterintelligence strike. The official record will show that you responded to a legitimate crash site, recovered survivors, and return them safely to base. The man to her left continues. He wears a suit that probably costs more than Storm makes in 6 months, but his bearing suggests military background hidden beneath civilian clothes. Mr. Petrov's involvement in any operational activities will not be mentioned in any documentation. "What about my crew?" Storm asks. Doc Williams saw enough to know this wasn't a standard rescue. "Your crew will receive appropriate briefings." The third person speaks for the first time, an older man whose hands show scars that suggest he's been where bullets fly. They're all cleared for the necessary compartmented information. This conversation extends to them as well. Through the debriefing room silence, Storm hears the distant sound of aircraft operations, the normal rhythm of a military airfield conducting normal missions with normal resources. Everything she experienced in the last 12 hours exists outside that normality, in spaces between official acknowledgement and operational necessity. "Ma'am, can I ask why Mr. Petrov was really up there?" The woman exchanges glances with her colleagues before answering. "Captain, there are threats to national security that require unconventional responses. Sometimes private citizens with unique qualifications and resources can accomplish things that official channels cannot. Mr. Petrov's background and capabilities made him ideal for this particular operation." Storm thinks about Ghost's calm professionalism during combat, his apparent familiarity with classified communication systems, his ability to coordinate complex military operations, while officially being nothing more than a wealthy philanthropist with a hobby of flying helicopters. He's not just a businessman, is he? Officially, Alexander Petrov is exactly what his public biography claims: a successful entrepreneur who donates significant resources to humanitarian causes and occasionally volunteers for military transport duties. The suited man responds. Unofficially, some people serve their adopted countries in ways that require creative interpretations of traditional service models. The implication settles over Storm like a heavy blanket. Ghost is an asset, someone whose official civilian status provides perfect cover for operations that need to happen without government fingerprints. His wealth and public profile aren't complications. They're camouflage for intelligence work that spans years or possibly decades. "Your flight records will reflect 8 hours of routine training operations," the woman concludes, sliding a folder across the table. "These are the documents you'll file. Your crew will receive similar paperwork. The mission you completed today was successful, but it never officially occurred." The folder feels heavier than it should as Storm picks it up, weighted with the knowledge that some victories exist only in the shadows between acknowledgement and denial. 6 months later, Storm reads about Alexander Petrov in Forbes magazine while drinking coffee in the base dining facility. The article describes his latest philanthropic venture, a foundation providing clean water systems to remote villages in Central Asia, funded with profits from his quantum computing patents and managed through partnerships with various international organizations. The accompanying photograph shows him standing beside a new well in a village that Storm recognizes from topographical maps. Less than 10 kilometers from the compound, they destroyed in what never officially happened. Ghost wears civilian clothes and the kind of genuine smile that comes from seeing concrete results of dangerous work. His hands clean of Afghanistan dust, but his eyes carrying the satisfied expression of someone whose unofficial service continues to bear fruit. "Interesting reading material," says a voice behind her. Storm turns to find Colonel Voss approaching with her own coffee, the older woman's expression suggesting she recognizes both the article and its unofficial significance. "Just keeping up with current events, ma'am," Storm replies, though they both understand the deeper conversation happening beneath casual words. Colonel Voss settles into the opposite chair, glancing at the magazine with the kind of careful attention that suggests she's reading between lines for information that won't appear in any intelligence briefing. Amazing how some private citizens manage to accomplish significant humanitarian work in challenging areas. Must require substantial coordination with local authorities and security forces. Yes, ma'am. Amazing what proper planning and resource allocation can achieve. They sit in comfortable silence while around them, the dining facility continues its normal rhythm. Pilots discussing weather reports, maintenance crews comparing aircraft status, the ordinary business of a military base conducting ordinary operations. But Storm has learned that the most significant work often happens in spaces between official acknowledgement and operational reality. Her phone buzzes with a text message from an unlisted number. Thanks for the lift. The water systems are operational ahead of schedule. Hope your bird is flying well. G. Storm deletes the message immediately, though she allows herself a small smile. Somewhere in the mountains of Central Asia, villages that appeared on no aid organization's priority list now have access to clean water, funded by profits from technology patents, and installed by teams whose official existence would be difficult to verify. The compound that once threatened regional stability has been replaced by infrastructure that actually serves local populations. Captain, Colonel Voss says quietly, sometimes the most important missions are the ones that never make it into official histories. The work continues, even when the recognition doesn't. Storm closes the magazine, understanding that her role in Ghost's unofficial service extends beyond a single night operation in the Hindu Kush. There will be other calls, other missions that exist in the spaces between government authorization and operational necessity, other times when private resources accomplish things that official channels cannot. Roger that, ma'am. Always ready to provide transportation support for humanitarian operations. Colonel Voss nods approvingly. Outstanding, Captain. I have a feeling Mr. Petrov's foundation will continue requiring aviation support for their development projects. 2 years pass before Storm sees Ghost again, though his foundation's work continues expanding across Central Asia, with results that make headlines in international development journals, while never quite explaining how such comprehensive projects get completed in areas where most aid organizations fear to operate. The quantum computing patents that fund his humanitarian work seem to generate revenue streams that exceed what pure technology licensing should produce, though financial journalists never quite manage to trace all the funding sources. Storm has been promoted to major and transferred to a specialized unit, whose official mission involves training foreign aviation personnel, while their unofficial responsibilities require more creative interpretation. When the call comes through encrypted channels, she's already packed and ready for deployment within 6 hours, a skill set that has become increasingly valuable as Ghost's operations expand in scope and complexity. The briefing takes place in a secure facility that doesn't appear on any base map, attended by personnel whose uniforms carry no name tags or unit identification. Ghost sits at the head of a conference table, looking older but more confident than during their first meeting, his civilian clothes doing nothing to diminish the command presence that fills the room. Major Morrison, thank you for accepting this assignment, he begins, activating a projection system that displays satellite imagery of mountainous terrain Storm doesn't immediately recognize. Our intelligence suggests a significant threat developing in this region, one that requires both official and unofficial responses. The images show infrastructure that appears to blend civilian and military purposes, communications arrays that could serve internet connectivity or signals intelligence, transportation networks that could move aid supplies or weapons, facilities that could house refugee camps or training centers. The ambiguity appears intentional, designed to complicate international response while providing multiple explanations for observed activities. Sir, where are we looking at? The border region between several countries whose names will not appear in your official orders, Ghost replies. What matters is that activities in this area threaten stability across multiple regions, and traditional diplomatic approaches have proven inadequate. Storm studies the satellite imagery, noting details that suggest long-term planning and significant resource investment. Whatever organization built this infrastructure possessed serious financial backing and technical expertise, creating facilities that could serve multiple purposes while maintaining plausible deniability about their true functions. The operation will require coordination between official military resources and private capabilities, Ghost continues. Your role involves providing aviation support for teams whose existence may not be acknowledged by conventional command structures. Around the table, other personnel nod with the kind of understanding that comes from experience with operations that exist between official authorization and operational necessity. Storm recognizes the dynamic from her previous encounter with Ghost, missions that need to happen but cannot happen officially, requiring creative interpretations of traditional service models. Major, are you comfortable with assignments that require flexible interpretation of standard procedures? Storm looks around the room, seeing faces that carry the kind of professional competence that comes from successful completion of missions that never make it into official histories. Ghost's question isn't really about comfort. It's about whether she can handle responsibility for operations that serve national interest without official acknowledgement. Sir, I'm comfortable with whatever assignment serves the mission. Ghost's smile carries satisfaction and approval. Outstanding. Welcome to the team, Major. Let's discuss what you'll be flying and where you'll be flying it. The aircraft sits in a hangar that officially doesn't exist, maintained by technicians whose security clearances allow them to work on equipment whose specifications appear in no technical manual. Storm walks around the modified Black Hawk, noting upgrades that shouldn't be available to civilian organizations and system integrations that suggest coordination with manufacturers who produce equipment for agencies that don't officially acknowledge their existence. She's beautiful, isn't she? Ghost says, joining Storm beside the aircraft while maintenance personnel complete final preparations for departure. Officially, this is a humanitarian transport helicopter owned by my foundation and operated under standard civilian aviation regulations. Unofficially, she's capable of performance parameters that exceed most military specifications. Storm runs her hand along the helicopter's skin, feeling composite materials that provide armor protection while maintaining the appearance of standard civilian construction. The rotor system incorporates noise reduction technology that shouldn't exist outside classified defense programs, while the avionics package includes navigation and communication equipment that definitely shouldn't be available through normal procurement channels. Sir, how does a humanitarian foundation acquire this level of technology? Major, sometimes technological advancement serves multiple purposes, Ghost replies, settling into the co-pilot's seat with practiced familiarity. The same innovations that improve combat capabilities can enhance humanitarian operations in challenging environments. Private sector development occasionally produces results that benefit both civilian and military applications. Storm completes her pre-flight inspection while processing the implications of what she's seeing. The aircraft represents technological capabilities that bridge the gap between official military resources and private sector innovation, creating options for operations that require both performance and plausible deniability. What's our destination, sir? Coordinates will be provided once we're airborne, Ghost answers, initiating startup procedures with the smooth efficiency of someone who knows this particular aircraft intimately. Flight plan shows a routine humanitarian supply mission to a refugee assistance facility. Reality involves personnel recovery in a denied area where official military presence would create diplomatic complications. The engines spool up with a sound that combines the familiar turbine whine of military aircraft with acoustic signatures that suggest extensive modification for noise reduction. As they lift off, Storm notes handling characteristics that exceed standard Black Hawk performance: more responsive controls, better stability, power reserves that indicate engine upgrades not available through normal military channels. Ghost, exactly what kind of resources does your foundation have access to? His laugh carries the sound of classified knowledge and operational capabilities that span multiple disciplines. Major, let's just say that when private innovation meets humanitarian necessity, the results sometimes exceed what traditional approaches can accomplish. Below them, the landscape transforms from familiar military installations to terrain that appears increasingly remote and challenging. Storm realizes they're heading toward the kind of operational area where success depends on resources that officially don't exist and personnel whose capabilities exceed their apparent qualifications. Sir, I have a feeling this is going to be interesting. Major, in my experience, the most important work usually is. The mission unfolds across 3 days of operation that exist nowhere in official records, but achieve results that reshape regional stability in